an important pair of no Nino, dating from late 1700s. Late 1700s. Think of how old that is. That is just extraordinary. They represent figures from a no drama, which has not been identified. It's unknown. And they're wearing matching costumes of green silk brocade coats, which are patterned with butterflies and peonies, and you'll see that in a minute. And long silk trousers in this really unusual checkerboard design, with interwoven melon crest designs. Very, very wonderful. The seated ones are 12 inches, and the taller one is 15. And they're rare, very rare to find as a set. You're seeing a portrait now of Kato Kiyomasa. This was made in the late 1800s, and he's wearing the full regalia of a fierce warrior, which really complement his extraordinary sculpting and painting of his fierce face. Look at those eyebrows. They're really quite dramatic, and the scowling mouth. Wonderful Gofen finish on him still. He has a green kabuta helmet, which is quite rare, with a crescent moon motif. He's wearing striped velvet shin guards, black velvet tabby sandals. Look at the detail. There's a little tied cuffs on his wrist. You can see the painted detail on his hands, which signify gloves. And he has the Shishi lion crest on his chest. He was a legendary hero and warrior, and so much detail went into the making and costuming of this doll that you could study it for hours and really not see all that there is to see on it. The red lacquered armor that he is wearing is very, very rare to find. Usually it would be the black lacquered. This is the black or gold, but this is the red lacquer, and very rare, and it's repeated on the back of his helmet as well as his chest. And there's a detail of the back. Notice the different, count the patterns on there. It would really, I would see 5 or 6 different patterns that are used in his costuming. And I really love his striped leggings. Again, theatrical, but showing the Empress Eugenie and her attendant Takenouchi again. And here they're shown in a wonderful theatrical presentation where they're presenting the tide shift gems to Ryujin, who is the undersea dragon king. Very rare to find these as a match set, each on their different bases. And again, look at her detailed sky brows. They have she has wonderful gilt lacquer paper armor with richly embroidered chrysanthemum. Look at the detail of that embroidery on, it's just wonderful, on the sleeves with a little mirrored effect, embroidered detail again. And he is wearing a dragon decorated armor with rich textiles. And this one, I think we're showing you quite a bit of the textiles because I thought it was so, I don't know, it reminded me of almost like patchwork quilts in some ways. It's so wonderfully done. There's interwoven fabric and then embroidery on top of it. Wonderful dragon and cloud motif. There's a close-up of some of the lacquered armor, which is quite fine. And then you're seeing more detail of that, which is really quite wonderful. Look at how many colors on there. Probably 4 or 5 different colors, certainly shading. And this one is just an extraordinary piece of work put together. And this is the one that reminded me of almost like patchwork quilts. Beautifully and vibrantly done. This is holding the sea shift gems. That is his tray of sea shift gems he's holding. And then you're going to see in just a moment a final view of the two of them together. Very, very vibrant. There's that rare indigo blue color again. And here she is, standing in all of her glory, the Empress Jingo. Very beloved favorite of many people. And there's Takenouchi, her loyal attendant, who stayed by her side. Notice his painted shoes. Now here is Watanabe. Watanabe in a Takeda theatrical presentation. This dates to the early 1800s when it was made. He's very dynamic posing. His costume is quite remarkable with Sikh peonies embroidered on the sleeve and his unusual woven rush hat in a folded design. And he's holding, right there, a papier-mâché cannon. He was a legendary hero of Japanese-Chinese lineage, and he was a popular figure on the kabuki stage. Look at the leggings. It's very interesting. They're really like shin guards. And here is the peony design. and the interwoven gold and silver threads you can see on the fabric. Here's another peony design. You see, it's not just embroidered, it really is a raised embroidery and then raised on top of that. And here's a view of from the back, and you can see the cannon again held in his left hand. I think you could have this little fellow in your home, and you could walk in every night and you could just feel good. You just start laughing looking at him. And that's what they was designed to do. The Gosho were cheerful, plump children. They were joyful. They gave a really great view of society, of a free-spirited child. And here is this little Gosho posed as a sumo wrestler. Very, very notable for their very plump. This is all carved wood. It's absolutely wonderful. They also use the Gosho, the cheerful children, for their little theaters. And here is a fellow who actually has a very simple mechanical action on him. That's the artist's signature that you're looking at. And mechanical action, you turn a lever at his back, and he lifts his arms, and he covers his face with the fox mask. And that's the lever at his back. Very, very simple, but a little mechanical toy made with the carved wooden Gosho. And this is another example of the carved wooden Gosho. Very, very wonderful hair on this one with the forelock and the sidelock. And he was the lion dancer with the bells in each hand and the lion mask on his face. And you can see the lever at the back of his costume of red silk crepe. And then we have a wonderful pair of Gosho. Very rare to find them in matching costumes. These date from the early 1800s, so again, over 200 years old. And they're performing the Odori folk dance. And they even have a little painted designs on their tray that match their costumes. And here you're seeing the detail of their face. Always designed to be these very, very plump faces and bodies with very full limbs and the wonderful ivory-like Gofin finish on their face. Very beautifully done. And here is the back of these little chubby kids performing the Odori folk dance. We have here a wonderful I love this fellow. He's, again, a carved wooden Gosho, and he's depicting a samurai warrior. He has a kamishino, which is a jacket-coat combination that he's wearing of a very intricately woven bast fabric. He's carrying the jade Nitsuki gourd at his side, and he has the wonderful hair with the bald pate at the top of his head and the little tuft of hair tied up, known as a T-whisk style. And there you're going to see it. This is a close-up of the various fabrics along with the stripes and the bast fiber tying. We have another pair of wonderful 13-inch Gosho, and they are doing a parody of the Odori folk dance. And please look at that is the presentation ribbon at the top of the head of one of them. And here are their wonderful costumes they're wearing. We're going to come to presentation ribbons in a moment. Beautiful embroidered silk, flowers, paulownia and cherry blossom designs, an unusual garland peach crest that you're seeing right there in the embroidery, and the hand-painted fans, which are very, very nice. They're doing a parody of the Odori folk dance. This is the original box they came in. These characters remind me of all of the movements for character dolls that were done in the French and German doll-making things. Here's a Gosho. What a wonderful, playful expression he has. He's from the late 1800s. He's wearing his purple silk bib with red silk edging, gold silk embroidery, and a brown velvet jacket. That was so luxurious to have that brown velvet with a symbolic design appliqued on the back. Very, very strong sign of affluence, and this held true in European markets as well. Presentation. Many of the Gosho were done as presentation dolls, and if you look at that wonderful little design at the top of his forehead, that is the presentation ribbon. He was actually inspired by the Japanese style of tying red and white paper tie cords around formal gifts, and this doll would have been given at a birth of an important child or a beloved child. This was a very grand size of a Gosho, and I'm going to show you how in a minute. You saw the presentation ribbon at the top of his head, and here is the presentation ribbon shown in close detail. It's actually like ribbons tied around what would have been his little forelock curls. And then he actually has sidelock curls. Fabulous fabrics on his jacket. This fellow is so grand sized, he's holding a wooden top. And in a moment, you're going to see that little presentation Gosho we just had with a turtle posed at his foot. So you'll see just how big this fellow is. Here's more examples of his actual ribbon coming around the other side, showing you more details. The grand size of this Gosho and the elaborate detail of the presentation ribbons indicate his original presentation as an imperial court gift or an omen of auspicious wishes for the future. And right there at the bottom, you're seeing that wonderful little Gosho that we showed you a second ago, so you can see just how large this guy is. One of my favorite dolls in the collection is known as the Imperial Nunnery Gosho. This doll dates to about 1770. Again, think of how old that is, 250 years old, wearing a red silk crepe kimono, the original one with a padded hem, rare narrow sleeve openings, matching narrow tie belt, and all of these different flowers that are embroidered on it. Very few examples are known to exist of this. When courtesans were retired, they were sent away to a nunnery, and they took with them their favorite dolls that they had been gifted over the years and kept them with them as symbols of children or their youthful time. And this is a very, very rare example of an imperial nunnery doll and the original box that he was stored in. Also in the category of presentation dolls are this wonderful pair of Ishimatsu dolls with artist signature. These were made about in the mid-1900s, and they were actually having matching signatures, were presented as a pair, likely as a wedding gift. Really intricately done costume. She has a cord-tied obi, a red silk crepe kimono and she has, on her kimono, she has embroidered fans and flowers. And look at him, in the back of his kimono, he has this wonderfully detailed embroidered fan. There she has, you see the fans that are embroidered on hers. Very, very different, but certainly designed as a pair, and they were likely given as a wedding presentation set. He's wearing hakama trousers with his kimono tied into it, and that's her little cosmetic pouch that she carries with her little treasures. She carries that tucked inside her kimono. Here is the detail of the embroidery on his hakama trousers. His black silk kimono is tucked inside that. I talked at the beginning how both the European doll makers and the Japanese doll makers determined to start having dolls that could be dressed and undressed. And it began in the about 1790 with the padded upper arms that allowed the doll to be done. This particular doll dates about 100 years later, about 1890. She has the triple jointed body known as the mid-suwari. Very, very wonderful. She was made for the Western world as well as the Japanese world now, and able to be articulated, standing, kneeling, sitting, because of her beautiful jointing. She has wonderful purple silk kimono with the red silk cherubim obi, and then the obi. And here you're seeing the jointing at her knees, and you're seeing her jointed ankles, which gives her great flexibility. Wonderful decorations of her hair. She has the purple silk crepe kimono has aqua and white flowers, and she has her silk crepe obi has the fawn spot design and has an extended train at the back. Oh, look at those flowers. Wow. There are like 4 different types of flowers there. Now there's 2 more types. Very, very intricately done, and these are all fabric woven flowers and metal and foil ornaments that you're seeing as well to accent the floral design. This particular mid-suwari is extremely special because made for the Western market, she has 5 additional wigs, each posed on its own wooden hat stand, and each with those elaborate variations of floral or metal or foil ornaments that you have been seeing. And each of the hairstyles is completely different. So the wigs were interchangeable on the doll, a wonderful variation. So the doll has the rarities that include her mid-suwari triple jointed body, so she could be posed in many ways, her very luxurious silk crepe costume with wonderful details, and in addition to her wig, 5 additional wigs that were decorated with exquisite silk, ribbons, metal foil, silk flowers, every type of ornamentation you could imagine were done to enhance these very elaborate and actually very, very formal hairstyles, each having its own name, its own designation as to when it would be worn. It would be hard to choose which one you would find to be your favorite. Very, very beautifully done there. You can see the metal ornament tucked in at the side. Here's the cherumin, the fawn spot red cherumin ribbon at the back. Very, very beautifully done. An earlier mid-suwari, made about 1850, has glass eyes, one of the early beginning of the glass eyes in Japanese dolls, a shadowed pate around the top of his forehead. You'll see where it has some shading on it. His side locks are very interesting because they have ribbons that match the kimono. And look at the jointing. We have them undressed so you can see almost like what I call the cradle hips. There are the padded upper arms, which were the first beginning of dolls to be allowed to be jointed and unjointed. Another mid-suwari was also made about 1800 and extremely rare because he has a nodding head as well as the other triple jointing. He has open mouth and what a cheerful laughing expression. It's great. Wearing a wonderful red, look at his body. His torso was particularly formed because the weight had to be in there to allow the head to nod back and forth. So you had to have a slightly protruding torso, which he does have. Very, very rare. And notice how he is jointed at the knees and at the hips and at the ankles. Very, very well done. We have one of my favorites. This mid-suwari was made about 1850, and you're seeing him from the back view. Look at the black velvet cap on the top of his head, by the way, indicating his childishness. And he is even holding a red velvet pouch, a woven pouch, to hold his various accessories. Wonderful detailed embroidery on the back of it. And he has, you're seeing a back view of his jointing. So he has, again, the padded upper arms. You're seeing him in the kneeling position. He's designed so when he is standing, all of his joints will be flat. So you will, the knee, the upper leg will rest upon the lower leg in a flat space, and the feet are really oversized to allow the doll to stand freely, although I would never take a chance on it, but that's the way it was designed to be. We now have a very, very beautiful mid-suwari lady made about 1880. She has jointing at her hips, her knees, and her ankles. And she has, again, the very typical concave back thighs, so when the doll was kneeling, the leg would rest realistically, the upper leg and the lower leg together. Beautiful, very, very beautiful costume with Uzan dyed materials. Very wonderful girl. She could have quite elegant posing. And lastly, a fashionable lady about 1900 with double jointed legs, her hips and knees, not her ankles. She had the concave cutout at the back. She has a wonderful silk crepe kimono with rare patterns on it, very rare patterns, and white silk in her kimono. And there you're seeing her very elegant legs with her jointing at the knees, different than the little boy who had the flat cut knees. Just as in European markets, there became famous doll-making homes or houses that were renowned, the Gimot firm of France, for example. In Japan, one of the very, very famous doll-making homes was that of Mera-hi Okihaizo, who had made dolls quite early on, beginning in 1779, and for 250 years they created absolutely wonderful prestige niño of the highest order and generally made for the imperial family or commissioned for the imperial family. This is an extraordinary set, a processional set featuring a young lord on a white horse with his 4 attendants. And things that are special to note about this is that each of the faces of the attendants are different, which is a very, very different expression. That is the crest on the helmet of the young lord, as you can see, indicating his noble status. This is the wonderful embroidery on his sleeves and his purple robe, which is really quite extraordinary. You're seeing there the trousers, the brocade material on his trousers. Very, very wonderfully done detail. Each of the attendants had different faces, and they had variations on their underkimonos and pants on each of the attendants. The horse itself was absolutely wonderful, with very fine detail of his decorations, of silk fringe and purple and cream braided cherum silk on them. But an extraordinary work, again, done by this particular house of Mera-hi. Another example of the wonderful work done by the Mera-hi family is a portrait of Jimmu Tenno, the first emperor of Japan. And this one was done now in about 1930, so almost half a century later than the set that we just saw. This is wonderful. The workmanship on these it's absolutely extraordinary, not only in the fabrics chosen, but the way that they were put together. He's really quite a grand size. He has elaborate strands of his jade-like glass sacred jewels that signified his emperor's status, the white brocade robe with the kinran detail, gold lacquered winged cap, green and gold brocade obi with demon head medallion, heavy metal sword with chase details and elaborate beadwork. And it's just of such a quality and grand size. Look at that fabric on there. The interwoven kinran on that is just an absolute joy. Gold lacquered armor. Design of the boots with a little cord around the ankle. There's the sacred jewels. You're seeing a close-up of the jade-like sacred jewels. Again, from the home of Mera-hi. Very, very extraordinary workmanship. And his gold lacquered hat. And look at the painting of the hair around the edges of his face, the suggestion of the mustache and the little beard. Again, another view of the lacquered armor with the lion crest and overlapping details. Beautifully, exquisitely done work. Think of any of the European houses that you consider the finest doll-making houses and compare that to the workmanship of this. That's where I'm trying to tell you that there are so many similarities between the European firms and the Japanese top doll-making firms. And there is his very wonderful sword on its separate stand with the jade-like jewels. The red brocade with the interwoven gold threads. And again, more detail of like the braided trim. Another example of Jimmu Tenno, the emperor, also by Mera-hi. This was also done about 1930, and not quite as spectacular as the other, but the quality of the workmanship is absolutely extraordinary, including the falcon on his staff, the gilded falcon on the staff. Very, very wonderful. He was a supplier to the imperial family, and he's considered one of the highest doll makers of the early 1900s, although the firm had been around for 250 years. Look at the belt with the actual staring eyes on the crest, and in his original box. And just a piece that I think is absolutely wonderful. This is also done by the Mera-hi firm in Japan, and it's a kendo martial arts student. So we take the little Gosho fellows that we talked about, those cheerful little chubby fellows, and here he has designed him to be a kendo martial arts student with all of the wonderful accessories that he's carrying, the gloves, the bag. Look at the different fabrics, how intricately they're woven. He has the practice sword held over his left shoulder, and the gloves and protected armor are slung at his back, and a really beautifully sculpted face. Look at the heavy eyebrows, or eyelids rather, and look at the different choices of fabric. Again, how many different fabrics do you see included there? In all of my years of cataloging dolls, when I try to determine what is a very rare, the rarest of the rare, I try to count the different elements of rarity that are in them, and this set has it all. They are 7 musicians from the imperial court. They're from the early 1800s. So first of all, they have great age and impeccably, just absolutely wonderfully preserved. They have beautiful Gosho finish on them with wonderful painting. The costumes are so multi-layered and so intricately woven, and they just have been superbly preserved. They are also rare because they are 11 inches seated. Now, 11 inches doesn't seem like much to you, but when you see them, you'll realize 11 inches seated is very, very large for this type of doll. And secondly, there are 7 of these musicians in the set. The set usually has 5, so having been the grand size, the very luxurious costumes, and a set of 7 musicians rather than 5 puts them in a detail of a class of rarity that is almost unprecedented. Also, the sumptuousness of their costumes and the quality of their musical instruments. Look at the length of the hair down the back, another indication of their great rarity and their great luxury quality. Here are all of the instruments they are playing. Each one of these musicians is posed seated with their hands in the proper way to hold a particular instrument that they should be holding. And here you're seeing a very, very wonderful example of one. And look at the intricate detail. Each of the costumes is different as well. This one now has her hands posed differently to hold a different instrument. And again, you're seeing the same thing. And please note the multi-layered kimonos, the rich fabric of all of them. And you are now seeing this one with her drum. And again, a different fabric pattern. And then this rare drum, and before you see she's holding the drumsticks in her hand, and before when you saw the whole view of all of the instruments, the drumsticks were designed to be held at the side of that drum. This one has a very dear face. This one is smiling. She's quite happy playing that instrument. And again, notice how her hands are positioned to play it. And they came in original boxes, an original signed box. And a second great rarity. I put this in the category of rarities because to me it is absolutely stunning. One of the earliest dolls in the collection is from the early 1700s, all carved wood. Rarity factors like a swivel head. How many of those have you seen? Not many. So her face can be positioned different ways. Very, very dramatic portraiture of her face. She has the wonderful painted green lip. Her hair is done in a carved manner. Again, carved hair. You haven't seen that. Carved hair very, very differently. And she has a very distinctive pose, and she's wearing a very richly patterned silk brocade kimono, a fabric kimono, of silk brocade with gold thread dragon and cloud motif under a brown silk gold patterned gauze outer coat worn with the sleeves thrown back off of her shoulders to really show her casual pose, her very nice, and there is the maker's mark on her box, actually to know a maker of a doll from the early 1700s. How rare is that? And I saved for a last shot, one of, again, skipping up in time almost 250 years, is a carved wooden young lord as a martial arts student and his attendant wearing their original costumes and with all of their wonderful original accessories, which are very, very fine. We're taught that Japanese dolls are different than Western dolls. This is my conclusion. And in some ways this is true, but not in their essence. And finally, in both cultures, there is a desire for preservation, a link with the past. Most simply, for the doll to remain in the family, to pass from generation to generation. But as collectors know, this is not always possible. There then remains the next best choice, that is for dolls, for niños, to pass into the hands of other caring people who will preserve their significance, their beauty, their history.